So tell me who you are and why am I talking to you?
All right, my name is Gary Fredo. I'm a retired LAPD police officer, actually a retired LAPD lieutenant out of Van Nuys. I think you're talking to me tonight because I was at the time a field sergeant back in 1997, March 8th, I think, Saturday, where we had a shooting over at the Petersen Automotive Museum, where I responded as the incident commander initially during a murder investigation.
And what does a field sergeant do?
So my duties have to do with being out in the street. I usually have 5 to 6 vehicles that I supervise. So there's 2-man cars. I'll probably have 6 of those units, but I could handle the entire division. It just depends upon what my other partner's doing. Usually each division will have 2 field sergeants for a watch. And it just, I'll go around and respond to major incidents that happen that I think that maybe having somebody there as a leader to be able to direct and set up things is important. Or I'll also respond if the officers get to a scene and they're not quite sure what they should do or they have questions, and they'll request a supervisor to come in and try to get maybe a second opinion or a buy-off on what they want to do.
Sure. All right, so walk us through the night of Biggie's murder. What do you remember from that night? Do you remember what you were doing before?
Yeah, okay, so I don't remember what I was doing before. Couldn't tell you. It looked
Just
like
a typical night?
Yeah, I didn't have anything on my log prior to that event, so I would have just been out driving around and, observing, or I could have been in the station doing some work, paperwork-wise, whatever. So I didn't have any major events that would have caused me to put something in my log. So I'm just out on patrol, looking for bad guys, looking for people to stop, looking for old ladies to help across the road or whatever it is that needs to happen out there that evening.
Got it. So then what happened? How do you get involved?
So
what's going on?
What I remember is that there was a call for service from the fire department.
911 emergency operator 412.
Hi, 52 here next door. We need you guys to respond to 5050 Wilshire Boulevard. We have an inspector on scene there, I guess with an overcrowding. They got shots fired there, and these people have guns and everything.
And they were requesting either backup initially and then assistance. So we came out over the air, fire department's requesting backup, and they gave the address there at the Petersen Museum with a loud, I think it was a 415 crowd, which means an unruly crowd that was being uncooperative. And then I think that upgraded to a fire department needs assistance. So they're not needing backup anymore, now they need assistance. So it's gotten kind of grave. So I remember when I showed up and there were thousands of people at this museum. It was obviously that it was overcrowded. It wasn't there wasn't enough security. There wasn't enough staff to handle what was going on. The crowd was extremely unruly and very unhappy with the fact that either A, the fire department was evicting them to leave, and B, is that the police department was present. So both of those items, we were not very popular at that scene. The most important thing for me at that time was to locate the firemen that were in need of assistance. So I think I requested some backup units. We got backup units at the scene. I remember I think I placed a couple at the door. So what I didn't want to have happen is more people coming in. So as people leave, they can't come back in. And anybody new that shows up, they can't come back in, and that allows us to kind of get in there and try to find out where these firemen are.
7060 to control. Show a code 4 at this time. We've located the fire department. They're okay, but we're still going to try to disperse this group.
Okay, they have quite a group there, don't they?
So that was myself. You can hear it. It's 7L60. I'm putting out a code 4, which means everything is okay. We've located the fire marshal that was missing within inside. So that was that report. Doesn't mean the code 4 with the crowd. It just meant I found the firemen. Now we got to work to get the firemen out and get them to safety.
Interesting.
LAPD operator 760, what are you reporting?
Yes, this is the Petersen Automotive Museum, and we need the police out here. We called once, and they came out here, but they left. They felt that it wasn't important or whatever, but we have a crowd of people out here that need
We need the police out here.
What's the problem over there?
We had a special event tonight, and we have a crowd of people in our parking structure that will not leave, and the event is over.
Okay.
In the meantime, I think we made contact with their security staff, and they were being cooperative, going, there's just too many of them. I said, well, just start directing them out the door. Just tell them the party's over, turn the music off, whatever it is you have going on here, it's done. How long we were in there, I don't know. I know we ended up making contact with the fire department. I think there was a fire marshal as well as an engine company that was there. We were able to get them out of the crowd, out into the parking lot area. And once they were safe, then we started working to get the rest of the crowd out. And I think it was at that time that we heard reports that there was a possible shooting out on the street. I didn't hear any gunfire, and none of the officers that were with me heard any gunfire. That's just what we were being told by some citizens that were running by us or coming by us. And then I think shortly thereafter, we started getting radio calls that there were shots fired out there at the Petersen Museum. So obviously we're a little concerned because I've got a handle on the officers that are with me right there within the Petersen Museum, but we've kind of had a perimeter now set up, and I'm not sure what else is happening up the street. And that was that became my next concern.
And people that don't know, the Petersen Museum plus its garage takes up an entire block.
It does, and it's right on the corner. So you're going to look down here, but then you also have to hit that corner and see what happens down the other side. So it's a large facility, and the roads were shut down, not because we shut them down, but because of the amount of people that were coming out onto the roadway just caused vehicles not being able to travel both north and south or east and west. So, yeah.
So you think that you guys were there on scene when Biggie was shot, or do you think that because there was another shooting that happened about 15 minutes beforehand where no one was shot, it was just a random guy shot a gun in the air?
Emergency operator 597.
Can I talk to the,
Sir?
can I talk to the police, please?
This is the police department. What's going on there?
There's a Petersen Automotive Museum. There's sounds even like gunshots going on at this point.
Okay, are you near Wilshire Boulevard?
Yeah.
Okay, we've got the police on the way right now, sir.
Don't know.
Right.
Yeah, see, the part is I don't know. All I know is we were there when, or I was there, I should say, and the officers that I requested were there when we got the radio call that the fire department needed assistance. And so once I got there and saw, yeah, the fire department definitely needs assistance because we can't even find them, and I put out a request for additional units. So if there was a shot before we got there, it wasn't ever reported to us or me at that time. And it wasn't until after we started clearing everybody out and getting the fire department out that we were actually approached and said that there was a shooting outside. I don't know if that happened right before as we pulled in or once we're inside looking and it happened out in the street then.
Yeah, because I showed you there were some statements from a couple of just regular officers who showed up more around midnight, which is when the party got shut down. And that's when they first called, hey, we need help getting people out of here. And then when they showed up, they went up and the building security said, actually, we don't need you anymore. People are leaving.
Right.
But then, so they said, okay, so they left. So you see a squad car pull in and then leave.
And I think what happened there probably is somebody put a call in saying, hey, we got an unruly crowd. You need to, we need help dispersing it. It's a private party. Somebody in the party that lives there puts in the call. And the officers respond. It's a low priority call. It doesn't even come out over the air. Nobody really else knows that they're going there. It's being assigned via their MDT. They pull up, they make contact with the reporting party or who's ever in charge at that time and says, no, we've got this. They are dispersing and we're not going to need you. So I think that unit backed off and went back out on patrol and ended up having to come back later when the assistance call came out for the firemen.
So there was some speculation over the years that maybe the LAPD didn't want to get involved with crowd disbursement just because there was a concern if we show up, it could make it worse. Do you dispute that?
I do.
Yeah.
And the only reason is because I was there, and I can tell you that there was never any talk about letting the crowd, go about their business and kind of simmer down or wear themselves out. That's a tactic that was used much later on, actually most recently, I would say. It's not a tactic that we used back then. Secondly is even if it was in the current situation, if we've got officers or firemen or paramedics that are in there and they need help, we are not going to let the crowd muddle around. We are going to clear that crowd out, and we're going to get in there and make sure that those firemen and paramedics or whoever else is down and needs assistance is able to obtain that assistance, and we can only do that by dispersing and getting in there and clearing it out. So I can tell you right up front, I have no problem dispersing it. We did disperse it that evening. It took a little bit because there were so many people, and it took a lot of police units. I know I had to request additional units from Hollywood and Rampart to actually come over and help, and even a couple gang units to come over just to be able to hold the perimeter so we could interview any potential witnesses so we could get their information to get them over to detectives.
So you find out there's been a shooting. What do you do with and someone takes you to show you where the shooting happened? They take you out on the street, or?
Yeah, I don't remember that part. I can tell you, if somebody came and told me there was a shooting out in the street, I would go out to the area where that they're saying the shooting happened. Now remember, while this is going on, we've got hundreds of people still being unruly and not being cooperative and are walking all over the street. So if there was a shooting in there, I'm going to need to clear that roadway. But it's like you said, it's a long stretch. Where did it happen? A lot of people weren't sure. Most of the people heard it, didn't see it. Then they saw some cars driving away. So my thought process was it must have happened between the cars. And if the cars were up a little bit by the intersection, then that's where we were going to focus. So once we got that cleared, my next goal was to control that intersection, block that off, put some crime scene tape up, and completely lock down so people couldn't come into that crime scene in case there are bullet casings, there could be skid marks, there could be other evidence from the vehicles, there could be blood, there could be any other type of things that are there. We won't know, but if we allow people to trample through it, it'll never.
Yeah, and sure enough, a couple of shell casings were picked up at the scene. Others were left behind, but luckily the two or three that were taken from the scene were then handed over to the police at the hospital. So it was nice that whoever picked them up knew police need this as evidence and took it to the hospital where Biggie was.
Okay.
And I think I think they handed it off to someone in Biggie's entourage, who then handed it off to the police that showed up at the hospital. Because then you have basically two crime scenes at that point. Because you have the vehicle he was shot in is now parked outside Cedar Sinai.
Right, and that's one crime scene, and where he was shot, that would be number two. You're right.
You've taped off the scene. You're dealing with crowd control. What happened? I mean, eventually, obviously, detectives show up.
Yeah, so while we've taken that off and we're getting a handle on the crowd, what we're looking for at that point, once we have it under control, is any potential witnesses that either heard, saw, or can provide information of somebody that did. And my officers carry around little field interview cards. And their job is not necessarily to get a statement or a full statement. It's, you saw something, what did you see? We get their information on an interview card, flip it over, this is what they saw, this is where they were standing, get as much information in terms of phone numbers, contact, addresses, etc. We don't do a full interview. All we're doing is getting a field interview card, because that field interview card is going to get passed on to the lead detective when he gets here. And so what I like to do with my scenes is that when the detective shows up, we've got a crime scene log that we've created on every law enforcement personnel that have shown up to the scene. They'll sign in with their serial number, their unit number, and also what their duties were there. And then I'll also hand them a stack of field interview cards and say, this is from Officer A, these are from Officer B, because he's going to want to know who took that information. And then they will take that information, look it over, and see what's the most pressing, who's still here, would probably be at the high of the list, and then move down from there for that interviews. And that could go days or weeks. I don't remember how many field interview cards we had collected that evening, but there were a lot of people that heard stuff. I didn't see stuff, but we heard it. We still want that information.
Right. Yeah, a lot of people were, the bulk of the crowd that were still at the scene were in the garage.
Right.
So they were, 200 feet down the street and around the corner in the garage when it happened. So they heard the gunshots and then saw a bunch of people run back in there.
Right.
Just from your experience, why is there a special difficulty when dealing with a drive-by shooting versus other? They were so common, especially in the 90s in LA.
Yes.
One of them, I think one of Biggie's security people even said that each city had its own challenge from a security standpoint, and they all knew LA is where they do drive-bys.
So my own opinion is, I found over the experience, I've probably responded to thousands of drive-by shootings in my career. Normally, not always, but a lot of those are gang-related. And because they're gang-related, most gang members are not, what do I call it, inexperienced in how the process works. So they understand if we're going to go out and do a drive-by, because that's their kind of their culture, they want to go harm another gang member, they want to harm someone else who they feel has wronged them. They need to be able to get close to that individual, and a vehicle is really easy to do. A vehicle also provides somewhat of a cover during it, and it also provides the getaway. It's all in one. So if you can take the vehicle, and if you can get a stolen vehicle, and then what I would see sometimes is if you could cold plate the stolen, which is not done a lot, people don't realize it, is that cold plating is, I steal your, what did you drive here today? So your vehicle, I know the make and model, I know the color of it. Color's not as important, but I know the make and model of the car. I want to use that in a crime. If I just take it and leave, now you're going to report your license plate stolen, and that car is now hot, and there's likelihood that maybe I'm going to get stopped. So if I don't use it right away, it's worthless to me, because sooner or later, if you're driving around the streets of LA, your license plate's going to get run. Now what I can do is I can go find another car that looks like yours, an exact match, same year, same everything. I take that license plate and I put it on your car, and I take your license plate and I put it on that car. Do you know your license plate number?
Like the
by
first
heart.
few letters.
If that, how often
Right.
do you look at it when you go to your car?
Exactly. Never.
Hardly ever. So
Right.
if you cold plate that car until the owner realizes, hey, that's not my plate, or the poor, person that is not even involved has a stolen plate on their car. But even if the police run the cold plated car, usually what we're looking for is what? Are there any wants or warrants on the car? No. Does the plate come back to a 75 Chevy Impala? Yes. Properly registered, has insurance? Yes. Looks squared away, let's leave it alone. We have no way of knowing it's stolen. We won't know it's stolen until we go up and we run the VIN number and it doesn't match the plate.
Right.
And they can use those cars for weeks on end until that. And so they have time to plan. And I find that once that crime occurs or the shooting occurs, because they are experienced in the criminal justice system, unfortunately, they don't cooperate with the police. They don't snitch out their friends. They'll go and do the time that's necessary and then get out. So there's a lot of investigating that we can do if we can't turn anyone that was in the vehicle, even if we could identify it.
Right.
And that's why, a lot of those crimes, we may be able to know who did it, but being able to prove that to a jury becomes much more difficult.
Yeah. Some people try to say that, there's one conspiracy theory that Biggie was killed by dirty cops or the friend of a dirty cop. There's other people that think that, Biggie and Tupac both were killed by professional hitmen. And my comeback always is, who is more adept in 1996 and 97 at killing someone from a moving vehicle than a gang member in LA at that time? Like you said, you personally worked thousands of those drive-by shootings. They were common.
And they didn't seem anything special. And the truth be told, the reason I don't think it was professionally done or done by law enforcement, bad apples in law enforcement or something, you couldn't have done it at a worse spot where there's 1,000 witnesses, right? That's not the place that if somebody has any kind of, knowledge or expertise in that, they're going to wait till he moves. He's going to wait till he gets to a dark road. He's getting in front of his house with nobody there, not out at the main street. This was more of and this is just my guessing, is more, some kind of heat of passion. Maybe there was words that were exchanged somewhere in there. Maybe because of the rivalry between the East and West, one of them decided that the West has got to go, or the East had already been shot and we have to have payback. And so they just used their senior gang members and said, go do your thing.
Yeah. Keefe D is this guy who is now sitting in jail waiting for Tupac's murder. The trial's in August.
Okay.
He was a Crip shot caller down in Compton at the time.
Okay.
He just by chance, not only did he have a connection to Tupac's murder, but he by chance was at the Petersen Museum that night.
Okay.
And talked to Biggie. He knew Biggie and knew Puffy apparently. Keefe was interviewed for it as a result of that. So he actually gave an account from that night, and he said that once they finally let everybody leave, they were just at because eventually it was like there's this backlog of cars in that garage.
3-4 minutes later, the man pulled over my car. Officer in the middle of the thing, waving us out of it, waving the cars on. Get up out of here,
From the parking structure, you mean?
From the parking structure.
And he said he just left. I don't think anybody even talked to him, but there's 1,700 people there. Yeah. Obviously, you can't go around and talk to 1,700.
No, and I think there's a misconception too, is that, if you're at a crime scene and you've got 100 witnesses, 200 witnesses, whatever they may be, you don't have the legal authority to detain any of them. They have not committed a crime. They're a witness. So if you can't get them to cooperate with you and give you their information or to stay there till the detectives come and they're like, pound sand, have a nice day, I don't want to get involved. Unless you have some reason to believe or reasonable suspicion that they're somehow tied to that criminal activity that you're investigating, you're not going to be able to force them to stay.
Right.
And you have to be really careful with that, because some people are like, well, the more serious you need to, hold on to them, and that's not true.
Right.
In fact, if you do something like that, sometimes you take a potential good witness and turn that person into an uncooperative witness, right? Maybe they don't want to cooperate that night because their friends are around, etc. Let's just get their information, let them go. And if people don't want to come up and cooperate, people don't want to come talk to us when we're standing there, right? We're taking information. And if you want to just walk on by, is that something that most normal citizens would do, right? If you saw a crime and you saw something horrifically happen, you're going to get involved. I mean, you may not jump in and prevent the crime, but you're going to be a good witness. And after, when the officers get there, you're going to tell them what you see.
Yeah. There was an off-duty Inglewood police officer who was working as part of Biggie's security team that night.
Okay.
He was there the previous night at the award show at the Shrine Auditorium down by USC, and then they had him come back again for this one last night with Biggie at this party with Bad Boy. And so he's in the third follow vehicle with the head of Bad Boy Security, the head of the labels security, and when the shooting happens up the street from them, because they were kind of far back still when it happened. But they saw the shooting happen, they saw the shooter in the Impala take off around the corner, and he, for some reason, hesitated to give chase. And then finally did give chase, but they lost him. But he said something in his interview with detectives a couple of days later. They were like, "Why didn't you chase him?" He said, "Well, I don't want to get in no shit. I don't want to get involved in that."
I'm playing it off like shit. I'm not gonna chase nobody. Hell, I'm not about to get in no shit. And actually, when he took off, he was gone. That's why I knew it had to be an SS Impala. It had to be an SS Impala. When they get to the hospital, they pull him in. I pull up and let the guy pull out. I pull around the side and I sit in the car. Here comes LA. I guess as LA comes up, then the sheriff come up, and they all out there ranting and raving. I got out the car, gave Kenny the keys, say, "Look, I'm out of here, man. I don't need this."
Did you decide you were gonna contact us, or you just gonna lie and wait?
No, I was gonna let them contact me. So they're gonna contact me. I know, they're gonna contact me. Yeah.
Didn't you feel that you had some responsibility there?
Yeah, but like I said, I knew this. You know what? When I got to think about, oh shit, man, damn, fucking work when I work, man, they're gonna kill my ass. I'm gonna get bites some days for this. I just said, hey, they'll contact me.
Can you have any idea why wouldn't he want to?
Why he didn't want to cooperate?
Just thinking like a beat cop.
Okay, so a lot of agencies restrict their sworn officers in the off-duty work that they're able to perform. My agency, LAPD, allows you to work off-duty with approval based upon the type of work, but they don't let you work in uniform, right? That's one of our requirements. Unless you're working a movie job, you're out, in a motorcycle cruising around getting the movie shot done on the street. Absent that, my officers can work almost anything, as long as it's not a conflict of interest with what we do as a living. So working in a criminal enterprise would be a bad thing and would not be approved. So you have to have prior approval for it.
Right.
Working in a bank is not approved. Working at a bar where they serve alcohol is not approved. Working at a strip club is not approved. Those are more of like, because we enforce those laws, We don't want to have a conflict of interest where we work one night at a bar, and then the next night we're assisting alcohol beverage control and going in and doing enforcement action. So the city's pretty particular what you can work. And then if you don't fall in any of those negative things, then you just put in a work permit and say, I'm going to work this job, and it gets approved by a command staff, and you're able to work it. There's still some restrictions, you know, not being in uniform, can't work over 20 hours in a week, something like that, so it doesn't affect your normal job. Other agencies have different rules. LA County Sheriff's, you can't work off duty, period. I can't speak to the Inglewood officer and what their rules were.
Right.
But my guess is he probably wasn't supposed to be working that. And he probably was like, I don't want any part of this. I'm going to get in trouble for even being here, and let me leave. Is that the right answer? No. 100% no. He should have stayed there. He should have went up to the officers, identified who he was, what he was doing, provided his information on how to get a hold of him later on that night or another day, and been a good witness. Because that's his primary responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And I think he failed to do that. So, yeah, very disappointing when I hear fellow officer act like that or do something like that, and I have no way to justify that.
And then in his defense, I'll say that that officer did apparently go on to have a long career with Inglewood Police. He retired, I think, just a few years ago. I think he retired as a sergeant.
Good.
And so I think he did okay.
He learned his lesson, he made his mistake, and he moved on.
Yeah.
All right, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Is there anything else you remember from that night that was just odd about the scene, or anything jump out at you?
No, I mean, if you asked me the day after, I probably had a bunch, right?
Right.
I know we had a substantial amount of police presence there.
After the shooting?
Well, I think the presence was because of the fire department requesting assistance, and then me requesting additional units from being inside, because I could tell we were definitely overmanned,
yeah, sure.
We were overmanned and did not have enough people to be able to disperse in a safe manner. And even if the shooting hadn't happened, which it did, we still hadn't found the fire department, right? So the mere fact that we had so many police officers, and yet we were still taking so much time to get this place cleared out, because not everybody was like, okay, I'm going to go home. It's like, yeah, no, I'm going to finish my cocktail, or I'm going to do this, or I don't need to go, etc. Whereas, I think if you or I are somewhere and something goes sideways and the police show up and say, hey, it's time to go, we've had a bad shooting out front, you need to go, I'd be like, get my wife, get my kid, whatever it is, and I'm scooting out. We didn't get a lot of that type of cooperation.
Yeah. All right, we did it. Well, thanks again for your time and filling in the gaps of just trying to figure out were cops there at the time or not. We're at a level with this case where kind of the obsession is just every little detail now people want to know about, including myself.
Right.
So it's nice to be able to get more insight into that. So